Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Just This UK Sanghas online retreat. Welcome everything and push away nothing. It is 7:30 in the UK in the evening, and it's afternoon in Austin and morning in Hawaii. And so as you're all filing in, I'm going to just give us a brief little run through about Zoom meeting in case you're not familiar. My name is Jessica, by the way.
Hello, it's wonderful to welcome you to our first ever UK online retreat. And I'd like to welcome people from different parts of Europe and the United States and around the world. And I want to thank you for being here tonight and to making this retreat possible. My name's Josh, and I'll be introducing all the evening sessions and closing them at the end of the session with you. Flint's been coming to the UK for many years now, and it feels that part of the rhythm of the year is for Flint to migrate here in early spring, in May, at a time of such possibility and abundance, and also to go to Switzerland in the autumn for many, many years. So he's been supporting us for over a decade in our practice and our lives, and also to develop very flourishing Sanghas. So the year doesn't seem in the right axis this year, as so many things are not happening, and we're experiencing very unusual times. But we are delighted to have created this online retreat after the disappointment of the cancellation of the retreats here in the UK. And the organizing team have actually had to learn very quickly how to do this. We're used to creating events in places, but to create events in spaces is very different. And we've had a lot of help from Jessica and from Appamada and from Kim, and also from Suzanne Kilkis at Open Door Sangha in Madison. So we're very grateful to them for all that support to do this. And actually this weekend, we're kind of like, in our practice, we're kind of making it up as we go along. We have a plan, we hope for the best, and we'll see what happens. And we would encourage you to adopt the same way of practicing in your homes, because we appreciate that your circumstances are very particular and very different, and we would encourage you to have an intention to practice and to attend the sessions, but also to be kind and generous with yourselves and adapt it to your home environment. So we look forward to this retreat for 4 days, and the many wonders that arise during and because of it. So I'm now going to hand over to Flint, who will introduce his Dharma talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. It's so wonderful to see you and to know that there are so many of my friends and students from the UK in attendance, and apparently from other places and sanghas as well. It's a great meeting in what Suzanne calls the cloud zendo, calling us together from all over the world, really. Certainly from all over the UK, but also across both oceans, to the United States mainland and then across to Hawaii, in the middle of the Pacific. It's quite incredible that I'm 11 time zones away from you in the UK, and we can meet in this way. I want to say a few things of orientation about the time that we're going to spend together over the next few days, and also offer some small verses that are useful to bracket and hold our practice when we're dispersed like this, and each of us in our own homes in different locations. It's useful to have forms which help hold together what seems somewhat ephemeral. And so sometimes these verses or forms will assist us in that. So I'd like to, as Jessica mentioned, I'm going to share my screen for a second and hope that this works out okay, so you can see the verses that we're going to use. I can also have them sent to you, if you'd like, by email, everyone that's on the list. So Jan or Judy, someone will be able to send it to you. Let's make sure I get this. Always it takes a few steps here. Here are the verses that we will use. Before the Dharma talk, we will chant together, and this is an interesting process because you only hear me or the person leading the chant and yourself, although you know that there's nearly 80 people chanting with you. We begin by repeating this: the Dharma is vast and subtle. We now have a chance to hear it, study it, and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. So in that short verse, there's an indication that we know we're entering something that is vast and subtle. It's in some ways inconceivable, yet realizable. We can embody it. And now we have a chance to hear some reflections of the Dharma, to study the Dharma together, to practice it. And then we vow, we orient ourselves, we take up the deep practice of realizing the meaning of what we hear and what we're studying and what we're practicing. At the end, we'll return and dedicate our practice for the benefit of everyone. This is the Dharmic version of applauding from our balconies for the healthcare workers. This is the Dharmic version of sending out all of our good wishes to everyone, everywhere, really, even beyond who we know and see. May our intention equally permeate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way, with the goodness of this particular practice that we're engaged in. And then we follow it by chanting the Bodhisattva vow 3 times, which is the expression of the Buddha's way. And we chant it 3 times. The first version is shown here, where we each have our personal vow. We chant it again, where we say, for example, beings that are numberless, we vow to free them, indicating that, of course, we're all included in this process, and we can't actually accomplish or enter or express this vow on our own. And then the third version is the inconceivable. Beings are numberless, this vow frees them all. Delusions are inexhaustible, this vow ends them all. Finally, this vow embodies it. So that's just an indication of some of what we'll be using. And once again, we'll send you a copy so you'll have it in front of you. Let's see if I can find my cursor. We'll come back. A few other aspects of kind of orientation today. I will be joined, and I'm exceedingly grateful for this, I'll be joined by one of the students from the UK Sanghas each day in my talk. And it's a way to bow to and honor the ceremonies and the relationships that we are not able to enact more intimately and personally this time. We were to have a final head student ceremony for Trudy Johnston this time, which we're unable to have because we're not there. And yet she does have something to offer today, and I'll invite her later on to make that offering along with her assistant during her time as head student, classically called a Benji. The classical name for the head student is Shuso in Japanese. And it's traditional for the assistant or Benji to write a poem and offer it in the final ceremony. And I've asked Jan Royal, who is that assistant, if she would offer that poem today, actually, as an indication that this would have been a completion time. But we'll continue on until we can meet in person. There isn't a necessity for things to be sequential. It's not like a relay race where the baton is handed off to someone and then someone else takes it. There's a flow and a continuation of teachings and relationships and friendship and basic goodness in all of this. The person who was to also enter as head student, Katherine Ellis, will be joining me tomorrow online, and you'll hear from her. We won't enact the entry ceremony. We're going to wait until we can do that in person. And yet, because she was selected and she accepted, this is something important about the life of a Sangha and ceremonies. Ceremonies are celebratory and in some ways somewhat sacred versions of a community acknowledging something that has already happened. So Katherine's selection, her assent to offering herself as head student has in some ways begun. There's just not the formal ceremony. But she'll speak to that tomorrow because it's also apropos to the topic of our retreat about welcoming everything and push away nothing. On Saturday, well, before that, there's one more ceremony that we were going to engage, which is really quite a profound ceremony. And my teaching partner, Peg Syverson, was to come with me to the UK for the first time to make sure that we could accomplish the completion of all these ceremonies. So we're missing her visit as well. And that third ceremony was the lay teacher entrustment for Josh Gifford, who you heard from just a moment ago. And yet his leadership, his teaching has already begun. But at some point, we'll have a beautiful ceremony to celebrate that and fully embody that rite of transition, although his teaching has begun, like I said. So these things are still in the future. Hopefully, at some point, we'll be able to travel and be able to do those ceremonies. I don't know when that will be, of course. There, on Saturday, I will also invite another student to speak with me. Josh will be speaking with me on the final day Sunday. And this is a student who has been significant in opening the Dharma in the south of the UK. Francesca Diepschlag, or Cheska, as we know her, who began the first small sitting group in East Grinstead and has continued to support the Sanghas in the South, along with Kate Winslet and David Hobson. And Cheska has just been such a wonderful and encouraging and delightful student for so long. I'm going to ask her to speak with me on Saturday and offer some of her expressions of this particular topic. So that gives you a bit of an orientation to how we're going to walk through these days together in some part. I know that there's some of you who were in the retreat at Sheldon and maybe in Sheffield and in Lancaster as well, the non-residential retreats in 2016, 4 years ago. During that time, I awoke in the morning to get my ride with Judy and some other folks who were going to drive me south, only to learn that my teacher, Blanche Hartman, had died that very morning. The topic for that retreat was living with impermanence, which in some ways is a variant of the topic that we're dealing with right now. So we've arrived in this retreat with a strong flavor and scent and embodied response to a huge amount of loss in the pandemic and a new reality. And of course, as I was preparing for this retreat, following the retreat in Madison a week ago, on Friday, my father died. So I once again enter a retreat in the UK with all of you with a fresh, important, profound loss in my own heart and body. Our practice, as you know, is relational, profoundly relational, even dialogical. And so it will be with this retreat. And that's why I've invited other students to speak with me. A phrase that you may have heard me use before, which I found quite wonderful from Dogen. He said, allow your heart to go out and abide among things, and allow things to return and abide in your heart. You know, we call out to each other and to the world just by the way we live our life. And we're called out by the other, by the myriad things, by everything around us. And this dance and rhythm that we call life and death, the great matter of birth and death, offers itself to us in and out of our lives as we call out to everything, and everything calls us out. Dogen also said, our challenge is to receive a body and to let go of a body, to give up a body. And this is in fact where we do find ourselves right now. I want to reflect for a moment on what are called the 5 invitations or the 5 precepts for dying by Frank Ostasecki. He is a Zen practitioner and a leader of the Metta Institute. He developed the Zen hospice at the San Francisco Zen Center. And during that time, he, of course, had experiences which taught him a great deal. And his book is available if you'd like to see it, The 5 Invitations, Discovering What Death Can Teach Us About Living Fully. And I wanted to just briefly review these 5 things because curiously, as I was reviewing them this morning, I realized that in some way they reflect our days together. Pardon me. And the first one is actually the one from which we took the theme of this retreat. We actually used his word. The first precept is welcome everything, push away nothing. The practice of welcome, of course, doesn't mean liking or approving what comes, if you haven't noticed. It's not our job to approve or disapprove. That's ordinary samsaric life. Our practice is to cultivate a capacity to relinquish control, to listen deeply, to pay careful attention to the ever-changing experience. And in doing so, we might discover the possibility of opening to a kind of fearless receptivity. And I want to say for a moment, fearless receptivity does not mean a receptivity without fear. It's a different kind of fearless. You might feel fear and still say, yes, still embody a willingness. this journey of continuous discovery takes us into new and unexplored territory, the one we're inhabiting right now. We're never sure of the outcomes, so it takes courage and flexibility to persevere. Just as Josh mentioned, we'll do our best. Our lives are a shared journey of turning toward everything, opening, risking, and forgiving constantly. Forgiving constantly. So this is the first precept, the first invitation. Welcome everything, push away nothing. The second is, and this is what we're speaking about today, of course, this first precept. The second is, bring your whole self to the experience. And the process of healing, whether it's ourselves or others, when we open to a space of healing, we open both our joy and our fear. In the service of this healing, we draw on our own strength, but also our helplessness, our wounds, our passions, to discover a meeting place with the other. How are we called out? What do we call to? And professional warmth, as a psychotherapist, I can tell you, and working in hospitals for years, professional warmth doesn't heal. Advice doesn't actually help. It's not our expertise, but the exploration of our own suffering that enables us to be of real assistance to each other and to the world. That's what allows us to touch another human being's pain with compassion instead of with fear or pity. We have to invite it all in. We can't travel with others in territory we haven't explored ourselves, and this is the nature of a retreat, to walk together, to explore this territory. And it's the exploration of our own inner life that enables us to form an empathic bridge to ourselves, to the world, to others, to everything. And curiously, these are some of the qualities in the second precept. Bring your whole self to the experience that Trudy will be speaking about in just a little bit. The third precept, don't wait. Patience is different than waiting. This is not an indication that you shouldn't pause and make a space. When we wait, in this case, what is referring to is kind of a holding back. We're full of expectations, anxiety. When we're waiting, we miss what this moment has to offer by not stepping into it. Worrying or strategizing about what the future holds for us, we miss the opportunities that are right in front of us. Waiting for the moment of death, we miss so many moments of living. Don't wait. If there's someone you love, tell him or her that you love them. Allow the precarious nature of this life to show you what's most important. Then enter fully. And curiously, the teachings in this precept are a little of what Katherine will mention tomorrow, what it's like to step into that which you sometimes would prefer not to. And yet, how do we respond to the immediacy of what's needed? The fourth precept, find a place of rest in the middle of things. You know, I don't know about you, but I often think of rest as something that will come when everything else is complete. Like when we go on holiday or when our work is done, all the emails are answered or whatever it might be. We imagine that we can only find rest by changing the conditions of our life. If everything else changes, then I can change. But it's possible, I think, to discover rest right in the middle of chaos. And this is where we find ourselves, isn't it? this place of rest is always available. We need to only turn toward it. It's an aspect of us that's never sick, is not born, and does not die. So that speaks to the absolute. And curiously, finding a moment, even if it's 1,000th of a second, the click of a shutter of a camera allows us to find a space of breath and being able to stop and meet what's right in front of us. And Cheska will be speaking about that on Saturday. The final fifth precept, cultivate, don't know mind. We're all familiar with this. Some of you may have seen the talk that I did a few weeks ago on beginner's mind, focusing on this. Because this describes a mind that's open and receptive, a mind that's not limited by agendas, roles, expectations. Suzuki Roshi is famous for the statement, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the experts, there are few. And from this vantage point, we realize a phrase that we hear in Zen sometimes from an old story. Not knowing is most intimate. We come closer to the moment by not knowing rather than planning, predicting, controlling, explaining. Understanding this, we stay very close to the experience of allowing the situation itself to inform our actions rather than our ideas. We listen carefully to our own inner voice, sensing our urges, trusting our intuition. We learn to look with fresh eyes. And this is the place we want to inhabit in deep practice, to meet each moment in this way. And this will be reflected, I can imagine, in what Josh speaks about, not this precept particularly, but the orientation in which he cultivates often with his kind heart, his gentle way, but his clear seeing. So as I reviewed these 5 precepts, welcome everything, push away nothing, which is our theme, bring your whole self to the experience, not waiting, finding a place of rest in the middle of things, and cultivating don't know mind. It's a beautiful description of how we want to make use of this integrated intensive, which is another way of saying, we call it an intensive, but it's really our life and our death, and walking with each other as we appreciate the great matter of birth and death. A student once asked his teacher or her teacher, when times of great difficulty visit us, how should we meet them? And the teacher said, welcome. As John Tarrant has said, there's no circumstances under which it is wise to refuse life. What we say here in Hawaii, maybe other places, but we say when we're on the beach, never turn your back to the ocean. The waves can sneak up. It's always turning toward. And when the Buddha was asked what to do with difficult emotions, he said, gaze upon them with kindness and remain still. This does not suggest, of course, that we have no preferences, no feelings, no thoughts, no embodied reactions. It suggests that we welcome all preferences, feelings, thoughts, and embodied reactions. We sit to receive, even welcome everything without pushing away anything, including the intense desire to push away things. We also include that. It's choosing deeply our life and knowing that it will be full of everything. It won't be refined. It won't be purified. It will be full of everything. A friend met Suzuki Roshi once in Dokusan and said, if I meditate, will I be less sad? And Suzuki Roshi said, what's wrong with sad? And sent them away. You can see on my screen that things are getting rather dark. It's not because it's becoming nighttime here, it's because a bit of a storm is coming. If you'll hold on one second. Just a little bit more light. Thank you. I want to share my screen just for a second more before I invite Trudy. Only to set the stage just a tiny bit. And you'll see a few small poems here. Bamboo shadows sweep the stairs, but no dust is stirred. Moonlight reaches the bottom of the pond, but no trace is left in the water. What is the action that doesn't break reality, that doesn't divide it, that offers a possibility of moving beautifully without fracturing the moment, penetrating all the way to the bottom, all the way through our own bodies and our hearts, with no trace left? This points to the inconceivable, of course, as we face everything and push nothing away. And this one, which I think we sent with the invitation, barns burnt down, now I can see the moon. How often is it such a challenge to feel what we have to relinquish, what we have to let go of, to actually see what's in front of us and to feel its power, to open the possibility of what wasn't available before. Watching the moon at dawn, solitary, mid-sky, I knew myself completely, no part left out. I could see that this morning just a bit with the full moon. Can we awake like we would in the morning, call out to the universe, let it call us in such a way that all parts are welcome, that we don't leave anything out? I'd like to ask Trudy to join me now. It's interesting on the webinar, what we call it being promoted to a panelist. There she is. Welcome, Trudy. And thank you for your time thus far as head student.
It's been such a pleasure.
Yes. We'd shared some things about a story that has come to you and mean a lot to you, and during this time, that I'd like for you to spend whatever time you'd like speaking about that. Would you like me to show the image so people can do it side by side?
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So this is a wonderful time for any of you to go to side by side mode again, just for a little bit. And anytime you want me to just come back to your image, I'll do so, Trudy.
Great.
So you just let me know. This is quite lovely. You see that okay?
Yeah, I can see that. I'm having the strange experience of not seeing myself, so I'm gathered, I'm somewhere.
I somehow lost it. Hold on, just 1 second. I don't know why it decided to go away in a different way. Technical difficulties. Welcome everything.
Push nothing away.
Yes.
When I was first asked to the ending ceremony for the being head student, I imagined that I would be with friends and we would be close and I would have that physical experience. And I'm sitting here letting it settle, knowing that my friends are close and yet I'm sitting here on my own in my front room. So I'm really feeling that strongly. It feels like it's been an incredible privilege and a blessing to serve as head student. And I felt incredibly supported by my Sangha and my Sangha friends and you, Flint, all the people who hold you up, and having a real sense of this is nothing that you do on your own. This is nothing that you can do just as a single person. You're always doing it in concert with others holding you up. So I might find it, at the moment, all I can see on my screen is you and the picture. I don't know if I'd find it easier to talk if I could see myself. So I don't know if you can pull that back. That's great. Okay. So what came to me when I was asked, you're asked at the end of being head student to think about a koan that kind of touches you. And one of the things that I noticed when I was asked to be head student is I'm very good at doing an outward yes and an inward no. And one of the things that I kind of noticed over this was part of being a head student is kind of cultivating that grandmotherly mind, the mind that holds all the well-being of everyone. And when I first became a grandmother in actual life, I felt way too young to be doing that. And then when I was asked to be head student here, I felt way too old to be doing that. So my sense is I just have a slippery mind that wants to say no to things, that wants to say no and wants to push those things away. And I think one of the biggest learnings for me being head student is how often I am often quite subtly saying no to the world, wanting to find things to push away. And so the koan that I chose was the koan that's called No Moon, No Water. And it's a story of giving up and of failing at the threshold to freedom. And it amused me when I read around this ancient story because there are so many variations. The main protagonist is clearly a woman called Mugai Nyode, who's a 13th century Japanese Buddhist nun. And she's in fact credited with becoming the first Zen Buddhist abbess. And in fact, there seems to be a statue that is specifically of her. And she's variously described as being poor, the daughter of a warrior, married with a child, a servant. And in a way, the fact that she could have been in any one of these roles was a relief to me, because it felt like it could be any woman. Any woman could occupy any of these various roles, and indeed she could be any person. Somehow, and again the stories are really different, she finds her way into a monastery, and she's either a poor servant or she's a nun, but she's there in the monastery, and she studies, and she has really deeply sincere practice, and she studies hard, although some credit her with not being able to understand some of it. Some say she was more involved with the studies than just being a servant. But what was really clear was that she became very disheartened that all of her studies and her long service didn't advance her practice. And, you know, I can resonate with that. You know, I first started doing this kind of stuff many years ago, you know, 50 years ago, and, you know, could have those real feelings of, I don't know what's changing. And this thing, sometimes this wretched thing called enlightenment seems as far away as it's ever going to feel. What's common to those stories is that sense of her disheartenment and her feeling that enlightenment is so far beyond her grasp, and she becomes very despondent. She then appears to have a conversation with a kindly old nun, and I was touched by the fact that the nun was kind, that the nun didn't quote scriptures at her or tell her to work harder or tell her that she was stupid, or it was just kind. And the elderly nun said, when she said how she wasn't getting anywhere, she said, "This is wonderful, my dear. In fact, what is there to attain? In Buddhism, there is no distinction between a man and a woman, between a lay person and a renunciant. Also, there is no separation between noble and humble, between old and young. There is only this. Each person must hold fast to his or her aspiration and proceed along the way of the Bodhisattva. There is no higher way than this. There is only this. Each person must hold fast to his or her aspiration and proceed along the way of the Bodhisattva. There is no higher way than this." This really encouraged her, and so she continues with her task. One of her tasks was to collect water from the well, and she used to carry the water back from the well in an old bamboo bucket. And the bamboo bucket had staves that were creaking and groaning, and that she had to learn how to hold it together, how to keep mending the bucket so that it would stay whole and that she could carry the water in it. And it was a bucket that was both her servant. It served her. She carried the water to where it was needed. But also she was her servant. She was the servant of the bucket because it was only her effort that kept the bucket together. So she walks along, and in the night she sees the moon reflected in the water, and it really catches her attention. And I don't know if people are aware, there's the most beautiful full moon over these few days, and it's rather wonderfully called the flower moon. So tonight there is a full moon that if you had a bucket of water, you could have a look at it in. Just as she's entranced by this beautiful reflection of the moon in the bucket gives way and the water spills to the ground. The reflected moon is lost. No more, it's not visible anymore. She's shocked, but in her shock, she also looks up and she sees the real moon, the actual moon. And in that moment, she realized that all of her ideas about herself and reality were nothing but false reflections, like the moon, being held together like a bucket by her own delusions. She released her delusions and she was awakened. And this is a version of her enlightenment poem. In this way and that, I tried to save the old pail, since the bamboo strip was weakening and about to break, until at last the bottom fell out. No more water in the pail. No more water and no more moon in the water. No more water in the pail and no more moon in the water. I love the way that a koan can kind of sit in the back burner. Well, I certainly have a back burner part of my mind, and how different aspects of the koan kind of move forward and talk to you. And what most came forward for me is the effort she makes, the effort to achieve enlightenment, the effort to hold the ailing bucket together so that she can carry on with her tasks. Her sincere effort leads to disillusionment and despair. A few kind words can invigorate her, but it's in the ordinariness of her service, and in the failing of the faithful vessel that she has patched and mended. It's in letting go and breaking that she sees the true moon. And I was very much reminded of David White's words on vulnerability. The only choice we have as we mature is how we inhabit our vulnerability, how we become larger and more courageous and more compassionate through our intimacy with disappearance. Our choice to inhabit vulnerability as generous citizens of loss, robustly and fully, or conversely, as misers and complainers, reluctant and fearful, always at the gates of existence, but never bravely and completely attempting to enter, never wanting to risk ourselves, never walking fully through the door. And I was thinking about the 5 precepts that Flint was naming, about that stepping forward to actually doing something wholeheartedly. And I can see how often it's our most sincere striving that traps us into thinking we are looking at the moon, when it's such a small part of what's possible. And I feel like the current pandemic has probably made some of us come incredibly close to our vulnerability. We found out the things we can't do, either on a personal level or a national or a global level. And we may be all trying to hold things that are dear to us, hold things together, and feeling the enormous strain of that. And I can often feel the strain in my body as I meet those parts of me that say no and want to hold on. And I can feel the strain in my mind when I'm trying to hold things together with an idea about that's actually what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to keep doing that. And the difference when I get closer to my own vulnerability and the vulnerability of the world that we're living in right now. I can see how it's the impossible vows that invite us into our vulnerability. I vow things every day I'm never going to do. I vow things every day I'm never going to achieve. And I can see that now as an invitation. That's what I can welcome, is the impossibility of it. And I can see how it's being invited to cross the threshold of what we fear, like doing a talk in an empty room, but to people I love. Or to see what we can't accomplish and that we have to embrace, that we really can't hold everything together. I think what I've learned, and learned by being head student and feeling like I'm not doing it anything like as well as I might, but I'm trying to hold it together. It's through my limitations that I cross the threshold. It's in failing, it's in the breaking of the bucket that the moon is finally free to be fully seen. And this is what I wrote as a response to sitting with this koan, the moon and the bucket. The staves are broken. The precious ancient water bucket has broken. The one that I mended again and again because I couldn't let it go. all the work and time and effort and hope and prayer and desperation and trying so very hard have failed. I tried to hold it all together. Glue, duct tape, spit, elbow grease, love, hate, prayer, despair. They too failed. I believed it had to hold forever, hold together for my pride, for my ego, for necessity, for life, for death. Otherwise, everything would fall apart. It failed. It fell apart. The staves split and the water spilt. It could hold the moon no more. In the failure came wholeness, the pure relief of failure. The moon now in the sky.
Thank you, Trudy. So dear, so beautiful. Is it okay if we share the poem with others?
Yeah, I'd love you to.
I make sure they get. And one of the things that you know is that having offered that poem, there's a poem offered back to you now. Because Jan has written one, which I assume you've not heard or seen. And if she can come on, I think, and join us now and offer her poem, it'll be interesting to hear its offering in the face of these things. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Flint. Yeah, I'm on now. It's been a real privilege to be Benji for Trudy, and this feels like a real privilege to do this. But I'm feeling pretty vulnerable, and it's a bit terrifying too.
So you're enacting our theme right now.
Yeah. My relationship with poetry is could be mildly described as ambivalent. I think a lot of people know that know me. My relationship with English and learning English at school was a frightening one. So when I was first asked to be Benji and I found out that I had to write a poem, I felt utterly sick. So I've had over a year now to sit in that discomfort, study my reactivity as a good student does, and here I am doing it. So Trudy, I wanted to write a poem that reflected the many facets of you, that spoke of your skills, your realness, your quirks, and your humour. And I wanted to honour what you offer to all those around you. So I have looked to your words and to your poetry, actually, for some of the inspiration for this. So you might recognise some of your own in this. So here goes. It's entitled, the poem, Not Just an Old Trainer. A phrase you've used to describe yourself on many occasions. So here's how it goes. Not just an old trainer, but once one of a pair of old trainers, until Jenny had to take her leave. Trudy now continues on the Hakomi legacy that Ginny began, sharing her knowledge, her skill, her realness, both her ordinariness and her extraordinariness, offering what's nourishing and what's been missed. Not just a therapist, but a companion on the path of life, touched by others' suffering and willing to be alongside them in their pain. It's best to hold hands, Trudy says, when you're scared. She touches hearts and spirit, offering healing through her loving presence. Not just a friend, but a spiritual friend, offering divine friendship, where there's no need to weigh thoughts and measure words, but free to pour them out to chaff and grain alike, offering acceptance that others struggle to offer themselves. Always there with a tender touch and a heartfelt hug. Not just a poetry lover, but a poet. Always ready with an offering from her beloved Mary, Rumi, White, and others. She writes, "How do you know life loves you? Life does not turn away from us. It touches us all, not holding anything back." Not just a girl, not a boy, not a squirrel, but a passionate woman, intent on ending suffering, offering understanding and her own vulnerability, sharing and inspiring others through her own journey to wholeness. Not just a Buddhist, not even a head student or a Shuso, but a goddess. Fierce and strong, yet tender and caring, offering wise words that even put Vimalakirti in his place. Ready for tea and a chat, as long as there's cake. Relationship is everything. Really, we're just walking each other home. Thank you, Trudy.
Oh, thank you, Jan. Flint, I think you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. I'm mute in the face of these two women offering themselves so beautifully. You can stay there, Jan, for a minute. Needing to go away. And you can unmute yourself there. I know that it took a lot for you to offer yourself in that way. And in doing so, you're embodying and expressing the teachings, no matter what you say, but by saying it. And so I deeply appreciate that. This is what we're all called to. And as an appropriate, serious student, you say yes, even when it's tough.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. And isn't it interesting that your willingness also comes through your love and care for another person? It's through your teaching about relationship. It says, and that's what makes it possible. Yeah.
The appropriate response to step up despite my fear.
And as we look in these little squares and you see the face straight on of the person that you're speaking to, whether you're looking at Trudy or me or whoever, there's the moon. The actual moon. So thank you so much. I know that I knew there would be a richness in sharing these teachings, which will continue throughout the retreat. And I'm so moved and gratified by its expression. So thank you both.
Oh, thank you, Jan. Thank you, Flint.
Thank you.
Any final comments you want to make, Trudy?
I've been so struck by the that it's the flower moon. There's something about that because it's June. It's, you know, it's so abundant and it's just available.
Mhm.
You know, it's something about that. This, what is available if we look.
Mhm. And last evening, Erin and I went and sat outside because we were up against a hill, and so the moon was up before we could see it. And the way it was positioned, as it began to rise up over the top of the hill, it was occluded by these clouds that were streaming by, and then an open sky, and then another cloud, and it was coming up through the top of the bamboo. It seemed ancient and beautiful. And that's how it comes, isn't it? We get glimpses and then it goes away.
Yeah.
We get another glimpse and it goes away. All the while the bamboo sweeping it and clouds going by.
Oh, you make a special effort to sit out to watch the asteroid storm, you know, and it's cloudy. It's in the north of England.
Here we go.
Here
We
go.
didn't stay up that late. It was a little too late. But... And Jan, any final comments you want to make, or you feel complete?
I feel complete. I'm glad that I took the risk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. With the time that we have remaining, and maybe there are others who have questions or comments. And if you, for example, have a, pardon me, you can raise your hand now. This is the time to do so, so that we'll have a chance to speak in whatever way you'd like to just spend a brief amount of time. There are a number of people online, so hopefully we'll be able to move directly into your question and see where we go. I think we'll call back Josh. I think, was he going to say something at the end to help us complete? And I'll stay on with him for a moment. There he is.
I said in my welcome, Flint, that you come to the UK at a time of possibility and wonder and abundance, and I feel so grateful this evening for such things from Jan and from Trudy and from you. So thank you so much for starting this this retreat and for the richness of it.
And each person who raises their hand is like a flower coming up in the spring.
Yeah, yeah. Like a bluebell. So I just wanted to say, if you're in the UK and Europe, we're meeting at 7:50 tomorrow UK time for the morning session. And of course we meet tomorrow night UK time from 7:20 for our second evening. Yeah.
Thank you. And I will also remind you that the evening chant, or the chant that goes after our Dharma talk, which we can do now, if you'll just listen to it, I'll send this on. May our intention equally permeate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. And then we chant the Bodhisattva vow, and only one person on the screen can chant at a time. You might want to mute yours, Josh, because it goes a little crazy. Just follow me. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. We vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. We vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. We vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. We vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. This vow frees them all. Delusions are inexhaustible. This vow ends them all. Dharma gates are boundless. This vow enters them all. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. This vow embodies it. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. And from the coordinator's positions, is there anything else we need to say to the group? Jessica, are we okay?
I think we're all good. Thank you all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you again at the same time tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.